Hi and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you once more for joining us again live here on Zoom, and for those who are tuning in on Facebook Live and YouTube. We have once yet another informative session for you today. We have our speaker, our special guest speaker this afternoon is Dr. Natalie Macneil Beecher. She is a proud Womerian, and she's a member of the alumni of the University of the West Indies, Mona. She holds an undergraduate and postgraduate degree specializing in pediatric nutrition. Dr. Macneil Beecher has been a licensed pediatrician for over 10 years, working in the hospital as well as private practice. As aforementioned, she is the current president of the Pediatric Association of Jamaica. Dr. Macneil Beecher is married with adolescent children, and she will be joining us now to speak with us on childhood obesity and how it relates to heart disease. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's open the floor and help me to welcome Dr. Natalie Macneil Beecher.
Hi, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for having me speak today. Okay, so today I'm going to speak to you about obesity and heart health in children. Now, when we speak of obesity, what do we mean? Now, this is determined for persons by looking at persons' weight and their height and doing what we call a calculation, where we look at what we call the BMI, the body mass index. Now, the body mass index, for those that are interested, looks at the weight divided by the height squared, and we get a numerical value. And this numerical value is plotted on a graph or a nomogram that gives us the things that are the values that are considered normal for children. Now, this is often done as a part of the routine examination. Routine examination that the child will have done when the child goes for their well baby visits, either in the clinics or by their pediatricians. Now, obesity occurs as a result of a number of factors: genetics, the environment, as well as behavioral factors such as diet and physical activity account for why a person may be obese. In Jamaica, we're socialized to think that a child who is chubby is healthy. But do we consider how the child's nutrition and BMI will translate into the patient's heart health in the years to come? Now, it is scientifically proven that obesity increases our risk of heart disease. Obese children very often become obese adolescents, who then go on to become obese adults. Obesity in childhood is a clear predictor of cardiovascular health and disease in adults. Scientifically, this has been well documented. Obesity in children has been linked to hypertension, cardiovascular disease, arteriosclerosis, elevated cholesterol, and insulin resistance, all factors which are harbingers for heart disease in adulthood. Now, what if as a parent or a caregiver, you knew you could help your child to live a long and healthy life, and with the decreased risk of death and disability from diseases such as stroke, high blood pressure, and heart disease? Even if we do not have financial wealth to leave for our children, we know that if we give them the benefits of health, that the advantage is long-lasting. I'm sure as caregivers, we all want to invest in our children's future. And this is one of the best investments that we can give them, to have a full and wholesome life. So what is the scope of the problem? Carrefour, in one of its papers, reported that 1 in 5 children in the Caribbean are overweight or obese. Some authors suggest rates such as 1 in 3, and in some instances, 1 in 2. It is to be noted that in Jamaica, our rates are close to, and in some instances, appears to be going above what is the global average. Now, how does obesity occur? We all know that balance is important in our life. We become obese if we're putting in more calories than we are utilizing. Now, as said before, the behavioral factors play a significant role. It's also recognized that the consumption of foods that are higher in calorie count, higher in fats, higher in salts and saturated fats and sugars, such as the fast foods and the processed foods, generally have a higher calorie count and a poor calories. And so this will increase our risk or result in obesity. Add to that the inactivity that is occurring at present, and you can only see that we are sitting on a time bomb that's waiting to pop. Obese children may have up to 5 times more fat cells than children of normal weight. These fat cells gained in childhood remain with us right up into adulthood. Research has shown, as I said, that obesity in childhood persists into adolescence and persists into adulthood. Hence, we tend to have an obese child is likely to become an obese adult. So obesity in children is fraught with numerous issues, physical as well as psychological. Now, what are the physical issues? So we know, as stated before, there are greater risk for high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and hence greater risk of cardiovascular disease. We know that with obesity, we have seen that there's increase in insulin resistance, and so a greater chance that these children will go on to develop type 2 diabetes with the associated dyslipidemia and increased risk for heart disease. We also know that things like airway obstruction and sleep apnea tend to occur in children who are obese or overweight. They also tend to have musculoskeletal issues. So they have joint pains. They may have what we call slipped upper femoral epiphysis, where they have pains in their knees and their hips, and they may have difficulty walking. It may result in a fatty liver. They may end up having gallstones. They may end up with gastroesophageal reflux disease. Now, metabolic syndrome, although not clearly defined in childhood, we know that these children who are obese have a greater risk of having a metabolic syndrome. And people with metabolic syndrome have a higher risk of cardiovascular and heart disease. Very often, children who are obese tend to be very anxious. Tend to be very anxious. They very often are depressed. They very often have very low self-esteem, which eventually will correlate to poor quality of life later on. They tend to be stigmatized and are discriminated against and very often bullied. It's well recognized that obesity is associated with cardiovascular compromise, as I said before. The atherosclerosis, the arteriosclerosis, the hypertension, heart attacks, and strokes. So these conditions result in an increase in what we call the morbidity and mortality of children and adults in general. With this increase in illness and sickness, some people are unable to work, or they have to not work for for days in the week because they may have various medical appointments, etc., to attend to. We know that if we look in Jamaica, that one of the leading causes of death in Jamaica is the non-communicable diseases such as heart disease and strokes. Now, if you were able to reduce the obesity in children, that means that you would reduce the obesity risk in adults as well. hence reducing the risk of these conditions and improving heart health. How then can we as a populace ensure our heart health in our children? We can encourage healthy habits from childhood, which healthy habits which start in childhood very often persist or are maintained in adulthood. So let's start with adopting a healthy lifestyle involving all the members of the family. Let's look at balancing our meals with our physical activity. Now, what are some of the things that we can do? We can encourage fresh fruits and vegetables. Let's take up a challenge and take the challenge of eating the rainbow. Those reds, those yellows, those green, with a little sprinkling of brown and white. Let's start with encouraging everybody in assisting with meal preparation, no matter how small your child is. If they're able to assist you, whether it be washing the fruit or the vegetable, laying the table, mixing, stirring, and if they're a part of that process, they're more likely to want to taste or be proud of what they've done and tend to want to eat those things. Let's give them healthier options as opposed to buying those processed snacks. Who goes to the supermarket? Who buys the processed snacks? And so we are the ones who are in control. So let's give them healthy choices. Almost everybody has a friend, a neighbor who has a fruit tree and very often is willing to share. So let's try to eat what we have available to us. The apples, the mangoes in moderation, the naseberries, the cherries, the oranges. Let us sit at the table together. By sitting at the table together, you'll get an idea of the amount or quantities that your child is eating. You'll also know how much and what it is they're putting on their plate. And if we model the behavior that we want our children to have, they're more likely to follow. So our plates need to have the serving of fruit and vegetable as well, at least half of the plate. Try to see if we can cover it with fruit and vegetables. Let's try to ensure that we teach our children about calories. Let's try to ensure that we learn how it is or what it is that is in our food. When we go to the supermarket, let's practice looking at those labels. Let's see what's on the labels. How much salt is there in this item I'm buying? How much sugar is in or carbohydrate is in this product that I'm buying? How much calories? How much is a serving? And how much do I need to consume at one sitting? So we know that children who sit in front of a screen are less likely to be active. And similarly, with what is happening, children tend to sit in front of the screen for everything. If they're sitting in front of the screen and mindlessly eating, whether or not it be television or in class or playing video games and snacking, they're not likely to be aware or cognizant of how much it is they're eating and how much calories they're consuming at one time, even while just sitting in one place. Let's encourage them to take on a little bit of physical activity. For children over 2 years, yes, we want them to drink milk, but ideally they should use low-fat alternatives or other alternatives. Let's use healthy methods when we cook our foods. Let's try to boil and bake and broil as opposed to frying. And of course, with the advent of air fryers, we know that we can use less oil or less fats when we are producing or cooking or preparing our meals. Let's be a part of our school communities. Yes, there have been changes in terms of the availability of sugary substance and sugary juices that are available in schools, but how many of us know what is prepared at the cafeteria for our children for lunch How many of us know what our children have at school when they go to face-to-face school at school? We need to limit their juice intake. We need to encourage them to drink more water, right? I agree that the financial cost might be a little bit more, but the financial cost of eating healthy, it's a matter of pay now or pay later. And I put it to you that the cost is more than financial if we end up paying later. Let's take on a little bit of backyard gardening. Let's plant some callaloo, a little bit of cucumber and pepper and pak chow. We can do this in a small space, even if we're space restricted. A little pot with our little vegetables will go a far way, I put it to you, and I challenge you to do this. Now, let's talk a little bit about physical activity. With the onset of the pandemic, our children have been seated in front of a screen doing everything as I have stated. How many of us encourage our children to take on at least an hour of physical activity? How many of us show our children the games we played as children? How many of your children know how to play hopscotch, stocky, or bat up and catch, or sightings as we know it? Let's encourage them. Let them get up, let them stretch. If you are restricted by space, buy a skipping rope, buy a hula hoop. Have fun as a family. Challenge each other. Learn the latest dance moves. Every child knows about TikTok. Do you know about TikTok? We need to be aware of what our children are doing on screen and be a part of it and have a discussion. Now, in our schools and communities, we can encourage our schools and our clubs and our societies to have physical activity or various clubs that engage physical activity as a part of what they're doing in their clubs and society. Look at your school population. See what is there. Is there a netball court? Is there a basketball court? Is there somewhere for your child to do some form of physical activity? So with those things that I have said, I leave you to ponder on those things. How do we ensure good health in our children? How do we ensure our children do not become obese? How do we ensure that our children will end up with healthy hearts? We need to set realistic goals and aim to achieve them. So I have said a lot, but take just one challenge and aim to start there. Remember, your child will need to have annual checks, and ideally at these annual checks, your child's BMI should be calculated and their blood pressures should be documented to ensure that they're within normal limits. In addition to diet and exercise, ensure that your child is getting adequate sleep. In closing, the heart is the center of the body. If the heart doesn't beat, what do we have? And so we should take these steps to help our children not become obese, to protect their hearts in the long run, that they may live longer and healthier lives with healthier hearts. Thank you. Hello.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Macneil Beecher. I mean, she went straight to the point, was very informative, very enlightening, right? And at this point, what we're going to do is open the floor to any questions or comments from all of our viewers, whether here on Zoom, over Facebook Live, or YouTube. So I'm just going to open the floor. So, those on Zoom, we can go ahead to throw out your questions that you may have for Dr. Macneil Beecher so that she can answer. Let me go on the both lives at the moment just to confirm if there are any questions or comments there. All right, so I'm not seeing anything from our viewers on YouTube just yet. Okay, so on Facebook, we do have 2 questions, all right? So first is, what are some tips on getting a picky eater to eat more of certain foods like fruits and vegetables?
So we all have the picky eater who gives us quite a bit of challenge. So very often we need to make sure at first that the picky eater does not have any underlying problem. Once we've established that, then you need to try. It's very often a matter of trial and error in terms of deciding what it is the child likes and doesn't like. Sometimes it's just a matter of we put the plate in front of the child and we're demanding that the child eats. If it is that, very often eating as a family or as a group helps. Very often, sometimes, depending on the age of the child, we'll tell you not to look at what the child eats over a day, but you may have to take into consideration that you may look at an average of what the child is eating over, say, 3 days or so. So you may need to cut the items into shapes. You may have to make sandwiches. You may have to make use sandwiches, use a cookie cutter, cut out stars for them, or make the sandwich. And as I said, involve them, let them cut out the star, let them use the fruits and vegetable to make a face or something, and just try to engage them as much as possible. We need to, for those children, we need to ensure that whatever they're eating has a good nutrient content. And my son he's teaching, I'm sorry, is our good nutrient content. And as you say, you may have to use some milk, you may have to use the fruit along with the milk to make a smoothie, or try to make a sorbet of sorts, so that they're usually very interested in that type of thing.
I agree. Thanks for that. I saw that Mrs. Sonia Lawrence Tucker, she made a comment while you were explaining, her son always complains that he has stitches in his heart whenever he walks for a long distance. Is this something to worry about?
So the truth is that if the child is having pains, and especially if it's related to exertion, my advice to you would be to have it checked, just to make sure that it's not something that is wrong with the heart. But the truth is that children in general, or chest pain in general in children, is not usually related to the heart.
All right, awesome. All right, I see. Oh, so another comment from the chat. Greetings from Montserrat, Dr. Beecher. Your presentation was very good. Awesome. There's another question over Facebook as well. How do we determine how much salt, etc., a child should or can get from a product based on the label?
I think you are better suited to answer them on that on that question. So it usually speaks. You want to take it?
All right. I mean, what I can say from that, I mean, we know that generally, based on recommendation or guidelines, that when you read the nutrition facts panel on a food or beverage product, there's a rule of thumb when you go over the percent daily values. I mean, once it says 5% or lower, it's good. It's a good figure. If it's 20% or more, it is high, right? And then you have to remember the recommended daily guidelines that for added sugars, it's for men, it's no more than 9 teaspoons per day. For women, it's 6 teaspoons. And for children up to 18 years, it is less than 6 teaspoons. So once you read the nutrition facts panels and you see, remember that 4 grams of sugar is equivalent to 1 teaspoon. So if you see something that says it has 20 grams of added sugar, that is what? 4 into that, that's 5 teaspoons. So that's, 5 teaspoons of the added sugars that your child would actually be. If they consume that entire product or 1 serving, that's, that's 5 teaspoons out of what they should be getting for the entire day. So you use that to gauge, their consumption. If it's that you normally give them the entire product at once to consume, that, hey, let me take out, what is equivalent to 1 serving or half of a serving to give them. And, because that they're getting sugars from, or naturally occurring sugars from the food that they would actually eat throughout the day. So whether it's breakfast, lunch, dinner, other snack items, even the juices or drinks that they drink, right? So that's basically it in a nutshell. hopefully I was clear on that for this user. All right, so I'm just double checking. Okay, double checking the YouTube to see if there are any other questions. All right, so YouTube is actually, so no, I guess everything is as clear as mud for the viewers over there. Facebook. All right, nothing there either. All right, so let me just go back to the Zoom. Anyone else with any other questions, comments, queries? I mean, you know, feel free to share. All right, so I guess we're all good. I'm not seeing any other feedback coming in. So want to thank you once more, Dr. Macneil Beecher, for, you know, that
Somebody has
enlightening.
their, sorry,
Oh,
somebody
has. Oh, sorry,
their
that's
hand
Gerald.
raised.
Yes, Gerald Ryan. Sorry, you can go ahead. My apologies.
Hi, good afternoon to everyone, and greetings from Montserrat again. Dr. Beecher, your presentation, as I said before, was very good.
Thank you.
And I have one question.
Sure.
How do we manage the child who was born already weighty? You have some children who are 9 pounds plus, 10 pounds plus, and they continue to go in that way.
So remember, we don't just take our weight in isolation. Ideally, what you need to do is to look at what the trajectory of the weight of the child is. So even if they're born at 10 pounds, that doesn't mean, even though you're saying there are some of them who maintained a high weight, but some of them born at 10 pounds, remember that genetics is going to play a role in that. So ideally, what you need to do is to look at the growth trajectory, and you're going to be plotting that on a growth chart, whether or not it be the WHO chart or the CDC chart. And you're going to look to see what the trajectory of growth is. And the child's growth should basically be going along the tangent of the graph, of the chart, of the graphs. You know what the graphs look like with the lines going, so they should be going along. So when you become concerned is if they're crossing the line. So if they start off going along the line nicely and then they're shooting up, you know that you're having a problem with nutrition and you need to address it, right? So very often the parent will come to you and say, oh, him don't eat anything. Oh, him don't eat anything. But sometimes what is good for you to do is just to look at a food diary. Put down everything that you are eating and to ensure that the child is in fact getting the amount of calories that they need and they're not getting too much. And that is impacting their weight and making them obese. You also need to recognize that there are some what we call syndromes in some children that are associated with obesity. And so you need to ensure that the child that you're dealing with is not syndromic, does not have anything else. And that is why the child is obese when you see them. Yes. I hope that answered your question.
I have had encountered children who, and parents of children who were born big and going to their child welfare clinic, they are told you need to get this baby on a diet. So it's, you're talking about, well, I'm referring to babies here.
No, so we don't put babies on diet.
Yes, I was going to ask, how do we deal with that? But you already answered, to a point just now.
All right, so for the babies, we encourage them to breastfeed up to 6 months and breastfeed on demand. And we don't want them to introduce any foods before 6 months. Right?
Breastfed babies only. Babies.
Ideally, we want breastfed babies. We want them to breastfeed for the first 6 months. Where it is not possible to breastfeed, then they can where there's an indication, then they can use formula. However, that's if you have you have a contraindication to breastfeeding. However, you then need to ensure that the parent understands what volume of formula or how many calories that the infant needs to take per day. Because very often they're just saying, oh, they just mix a bottle full of formula and just give it to the baby. And the truth is that the volume of the formula, the calorie counts that the baby require, is based on the baby's weight. So you should use the weight to decide, okay, in order for the babies to grow, they need 100 kilocalories per kilogram for the day at minimum. And so you need to work out or help the parent to understand that and translate that calorie count into volume of feed so that the parent knows how much feed they need to offer the baby.
What about those babies who are just totally breastfed? Totally breastfed.
Breastfed on demand.
Breastfed on demand. Breastfed on demand. I've had instances where the mom goes to clinic, child welfare, and nurse is saying, you need to put this baby on a diet. And this mom was just like, she was gonna flip. You know, lots of encouragement because she's breastfeeding, and that's all she was actually feeding the baby, breastfed. And but the mom is big herself, baby born big and continued to grow in that light. She was having problems when she went to clinic, and nurse was saying, you need to put the baby on a diet. She came home and she was fuming. Well, how am I going to put my baby on a diet? How am I going to, I'm breastfeeding. How am I to put the baby on a diet? And they show her the curve is going up, and it's like you're saying, going over that line.
So some of the issues with like breastfeeding as well is that, remember that the babies have non-nutritive suck. So especially younger ones, some mothers will tell you when they start out, they breastfeed like for half an hour at a time. Mm-hmm. So especially sometimes with the newborns, we don't expect. So after about 15 minutes, we expect that the newborn should be fine. And the parents will tell you, but if I put him on the breast, he's still sucking. But ideally, it's a matter of educating them about breastfeeding and breastfeeding appropriately, because the concern very often with the breastfeeding mom is, how do I know if my baby is getting enough, right? Yes. And so it's a matter of sitting down and working out with this mother. Well, you know, if you breastfeed for X time, you know, your baby should be should get enough nutrients from that. Yes. You know, you don't need to sit down and breastfeed for 1 hour or have the baby on the breast constantly every hour for the day. Listen to the baby's cues, and the baby usually tells you.
Yes. Okay, thanks for that. My thought is that one way of encouraging these are the older children now. I am thinking that parents, you have some parents who are interested or who love backyard gardening. And so if they get the children involved, you know, once you're out there, instead of encouraging them to be indoors playing games or whatever, you get them outside with you. And once you're in the garden, they could develop that interest. You dig a hole, you say, come, drop the seed in. And they watch that seed grow. They help to clean it. They help to weed, they help to nurture, they help to water. If you get them involved, then when it's time to reap, you know, that could be a way of getting them, they would want to taste or want to be a part, eating some of what they help to nurture and to produce in their backyard garden. Just a thought. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that. I did see in the chat where Simika Alexander, she mentioned, you know, paced breastfeeding. This was when there was a dialogue between Dr. Macneil Beecher and Gerald Ryan, you know, around the whole breastfeeding and stuff. So I just wanted her to kind of enlighten us on what it means, you know, to observe paced bottle feeding. So Miss Alexander.
Hi, good afternoon. So I just wanted to introduce myself a bit. I'm a lactation specialist. So what paced bottle feeding is, it's the way in which you feed the baby. So even if you're feeding the baby formula or breast milk in the bottle, a baby can be overfed. And it means instead of having the baby lying on their back and then basically having the baby feed themselves with the milk flowing down through gravity, you'll hold it at a horizontal point so that the baby can control the feed as opposed to it just automatically going down. And that reduces the likelihood of the baby themselves being overfed. that's what paced bottle feeding is. So that's something that's important to be observed when feeding children with alternate feeding devices if it's not directly from the breast.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that. All right. So, I mean, at least we're learning new terms as we go along the way. We're learning, techniques, especially as it relates to, pediatrics and pediatric nutrition or children in general. All right. So I see that we have no more questions, comments, concerns, neither on the live nor here on Zoom. So I guess it's safe to say we're at the end of yet another very interesting discussion. And I want to thank you so much to all our viewers out there here on Zoom, on Facebook and YouTube. And I just want to remind you to join us here again, same time on the 22nd. So that's next Tuesday, February 22nd, where we will have registered nutritionist, Mrs. Madeline Terrier Schnoor. She's a nutritionist with the Heart Foundation of Jamaica, and she'll be speaking with us on, knowing what you're eating, small steps that you can take to basically create a healthy heart or have a healthy heart. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you so much for coming out. See you again next week, Tuesday, same time, same place. And I encourage you to just keep safe, keep praying, and walk good. So have a good rest of your evening, everyone.